Let me start with a promise. If you stay with me through this workshop, I will show you exactly how to build real confidence in your child. Not a motivational style of confidence or some sort of temporary confidence, but the kind of confidence that shows up under pressure. The kind of confidence that helps them speak up in class and the kind that helps them handle failure without collapsing. The kind of confidence that reduces anxiety instead of feeding it, and the kind that lasts for life. This is going to be a really practical workshop. It's going to be simple and you will be able to implement it immediately. No fluff, no psychological jargon, no vague advice. If you're a parent who feels like confidence is slipping away from children everywhere, you're right. And by the end of this workshop, you'll know exactly what to do about it. Let me say something that might sound a little bit uncomfortable, but it's actually true. We are raising the most anxious generation of children we have ever seen. And at the same time, we're asking them to be confident. Those two things don't coexist. If you've noticed your child avoiding challenges, melting down when things get hard, worrying about getting things wrong, or constantly seeking reassurance, this isn't because you're doing something wrong. It's because the world they're growing up in has fundamentally changed. And most confidence advice basically hasn't caught up. So before we go any further, let me explain why you should listen to me. I've worked with over 50,000 families across 15 years worldwide. I've built and run the largest martial arts academy in the Middle East, the Warrior Academy, and across our academies globally, we teach over 10,000 children every single week. Now, these aren't theory sessions. They're real children under real pressure in real life. I've also written 2 best-selling books on building confidence, discipline, and child development. But more importantly, I've seen this up close. Every week, children walk through our doors who are anxious, who are withdrawn, who are fearful of failure, or convinced that they can't do things. And every week, I watch those same children change. Not because someone told them to believe in themselves, but because they were trained step by step to handle discomfort. This is actually personal for me too. I wasn't a confident child. I was bullied. I doubted myself. I avoided situations where I thought I'd fail. And confidence wasn't something I was actually born with. It was something I had to build, sometimes painfully, slowly, through experience. So when I talk about confidence, I'm not just talking from theory, not just talking from books or from privilege. I'm talking as someone who knows what it feels like to actually lack it. So here's the first thing you need to understand. Most people completely misunderstand confidence. Parents try to build confidence directly and they say things like, you can do it, just believe in yourself, or you're amazing, don't worry, you'll be fine. And those words come from love, but they don't work. Confidence is not something you can talk a child into alone. It's not something you can install with just praise, and it's not a mindset that comes first. Confidence is an output. What I mean by that is confidence is essentially the result of something else happening first. And when you focus on the output, you miss what the input actually creates. So let's talk about why confidence is so low right now. And that's all down to how modern children are growing up in a world of constant comparison, endless screens, instant gratification, and adults who step in faster than ever before. They experience less boredom, less friction, less struggle. And while that feels kind in the short term, it comes with a cost. Children aren't failing enough. They aren't stretching enough. They aren't solving problems on their own. And without those experiences, confidence has nothing to grow from. Instead, anxiety grows. And I see this every day. An 8-year-old who won't answer direct questions in class because they're scared of being wrong. A 10-year-old who quits activities the moment they feel challenged. A teenager who might look confident on the surface but collapses under pressure. These aren't weak kids. They are untrained kids. Here's something most people don't realize. Confidence and anxiety are inversely related. Let me explain. When a child hasn't practiced doing hard things, their nervous system learns that one clear lesson: hard things are dangerous. So when discomfort appears, anxiety just takes over. That's not a flaw, that's basically conditioning. And this is where everything changes. Confidence does not come before action. Courage does. Courage is the muscle and confidence is the product. Let me put it this way. Courage is choosing to act while feeling uncomfortable. Confidence is what's left behind afterwards. And that's why confident kids aren't fearless. They're just practiced. Now let me give you a really real example. We regularly work with children who arrive unable to speak in front of others, who refuse to participate, who cling to parents, convinced that they can't join in. And we don't tell them that they're confident. We give them small, controlled challenges. We let them feel discomfort safely while they're supported. And we guide them through it instead of rescuing them from it. We literally let them sit with it and feel it very, very gently. And within weeks, you start to see little changes. It's not hyper bravado, it's this calm confidence. It's the sort of confidence that shows up without being announced. And here is the mistake that I see so many parents make. They try to remove discomfort to protect their child. They step in early and they try to smooth the pain. They rescue too quickly without meaning to, and they teach avoidance. The goal is not to make children comfortable. The goal is to make them capable. Comfort feels good, and it feels good today, but capability pays off for life. Now, this doesn't mean being harsh. It doesn't mean throwing kids into the deep end straight away, and it doesn't mean ignoring emotions. What it really means is intentionally training courage in small, age-appropriate ways. And that's exactly what this workshop is designed to show you how to do. So, over the next 10 parts of this workshop, I'll walk you through a clear, practical framework for building real confidence in your kids. You're going to learn why courage is the foundation that everyone misses, how to train it deliberately, what slows parents down, and how to remove those blockers, how to adapt everything based on age, and at the end, I'll even answer real questions for parents in a full Q&A. This is a system that you can follow. So, if you're just joining now, watch the full workshop. The link is in the comments, and go back to the previous parts so this flows properly. And if this already resonates and you're excited to learn more, comment courage below, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss the next part and you tune in for future videos just like this. Because in part 2, we're going deep into courage. What does courage actually look like in young kids? How is it built? And how do parents accidentally block courage, even with the best intentions? That's where this becomes truly practical. I'll see you in part 2. If you watched part 1 of this Courage Workshop series, you already understand the core idea. Confidence is not the starting point, confidence is the result, and today we're going to talk about the single most important input that actually creates confidence, and that is courage. If parents misunderstand this part, nothing else works properly. You can do every confidence exercise, you can do every confidence challenge, every routine, but without courage, confidence never sticks. So this is the foundation. Most parents try to build confidence using praise, motivation, and encouragement, and they say things like, "You've got this, just believe in yourself, you're amazing." And that comes from love, but after working with 50,000 children and families across 15 years and teaching over 10,000 children every week around the world, I can tell you this clearly. Praise does not build confidence. Motivation does not build confidence. Compliments do not build confidence. They can feel good in the moment, but they collapse the second that fear shows up. Real confidence only appears when a child has evidence, proof from lived experience that they can do hard things, that they can face fear, and that they can stretch their comfort zone and survive it. That evidence is built through courage. Now, here is the core idea of this entire lesson in part 2. You can't tell a child that they're brave. They have to feel it, and they have to live it, and they have to stack evidence for it. And until they do, confidence is just words, and words don't hold up under pressure. Confidence is downstream from courage. Now, here's the part most parents miss, and it's that kids are actually wired for courage in the first place. What stops it isn't a lack of potential, it's friction. And this is what I've noticed working with so many families around the world. I've identified 5 friction points inside most homes that quietly block courage from developing. The good news is this: you don't need to add much. You actually just need to remove what's getting in the way in the first place. When you remove these friction points, you'll see that confidence grows fast because courage finally has room to operate, to grow, and for the muscle of courage to be exercised. So let's go through these 5 friction points straight away. Friction point 1 is overprotection. Nearly every parent does this. We step in too soon, we step in too often, and we do it often because we love our kids. But here's the hard truth. What feels like protection is often interference. When we rescue children quickly, they actually lose the chance to struggle safely and adapt and solve problems and build self-trust and earn real courage, and therefore they don't feel the courage. Courage is built in a very specific moment. It's built just after fear shows up, and that's why it's so crucial that they feel uncomfortable and they feel an element of fear. But it's also just before help arrives. So in that moment where fear shows up and help arrives, this is courage. Now, if that moment disappears, courage never forms. And I see this constantly. A child might hesitate and an adult rushes in and they rob them of that space in between fear showing up and performing with courage. The child learns one thing when this happens, and that is, I can't do this without help. So here is the first tool to remove that friction point. It's called the 3-second rule. The next time your child is doing something slightly challenging, not dangerous, but just uncomfortable, pause. Wait 3 seconds. Longer, slightly longer than you would normally wait. And then let them try. Let them wobble a little bit. Let them work it out. Those 3 seconds matter more than you realize. And that micro delay builds trust, not just in you, but in themselves. Removing overprotection has this effect where courage starts to grow very, very quickly, and you'll see it straight away. So that is the first friction point, removing overprotection with the 3-second rule. Friction point number 2, burnout disguised as achievement. Now here's the thing, burnout isn't about doing too much, it's about why a child is doing it. When kids are pushed to perform instead of being trained to grow, they actually learn to associate effort with stress. They chase results instead of challenge, and they fear failure. They start to lose motivation and they quit when pressure rises. All of this kills courage. A child who is only doing things to please adults will avoid risk the second approval feels uncertain. So here's today's task. Ask yourself one honest question. Are they enjoying the challenge or only doing this to please me? Then do this. Try to pick one activity today that's challenging but fun. Let them fail, let them laugh, let them struggle, and then make the goal simple. They want to do it again tomorrow. That's the main goal, repeating the challenge. It's a signal of healthy courage, not winning once, but wanting to repeat the process of leaving the comfort zone into the high performance zone, going back to the comfort zone, and repeating the cycle. When you remove burnout pressure and courage returns. Friction point number 3, praise without evidence. Many kids don't lack confidence because they aren't praised enough. They lack confidence because praise is disconnected from experience. So when kids hear you're brave without ever feeling brave, the words don't land. Confidence doesn't come from compliments. It comes from self-evidence, proof that they've faced fear and stepped through it anyway. And that's why so many anxious kids are also heavily praised. The praise floats. The evidence is missing. So here's the tool. Start a courage log. For 30 days, every time your child does something brave, even small, write it down and be specific. Date it, acknowledge it calmly, not hype it up, not exaggeration, just recognition. Trying something new, speaking up, asking a question, joining in while nervous, or making a mistake and continuing. After 30 days, your child has proof of their courage, and that list becomes their evidence. You remove empty praise and you replace it with evidence, and confidence becomes repeatable. But if you praise them with empty praise, you'll notice their anxiety increases and they don't really believe the praise at all. So, moving on now to friction point number 4. Parents who avoid hard things. Now, this one is a little bit uncomfortable, but it is crucial. Children don't learn courage by being told to be brave. They learn courage by watching you. So if they've never seen you stretch outside your comfort zone, feel nervous and act anyway, or even struggle without quitting, fail and recover, they won't truly believe that courage is possible. Your kids don't need perfection. They need process. They need to see your nerves, your self-talk, your fear, your follow-through. So here's your task this week. Choose one thing that genuinely scares you as a parent and let your child witness it. Obviously make it age-specific. We don't want to terrify our kids. We don't want them to lose their innocence by watching us go through something really devastating, but something like a presentation at work, maybe a fitness challenge, maybe a difficult conversation or learning a new skill that you feel you're not very good at. Let them see you uncomfortable and moving forward anyway. When you remove parental avoidance, you'll notice that courage becomes normalized in the home. That is a hugely powerful step for your child. Now, moving on. Friction point 5. No courage culture at home. Courage doesn't grow in silence. It grows in language, expectations, and repetition. So, if a home avoids hard things, children will avoid it too. If a home names hard things as normal, children will rise to meet them. And that's why we use a simple mantra in our warrior family culture. And that mantra is, we do hard things. Say it before a challenge, say it during discomfort, and say it when quitting feels tempting. This will turn struggle from a threat into a signal. When the struggle comes in, your kids will start to realize this is where I grow and this is normal, rather than fear it. Your final action today is going to be really, really simple. Write the mantra somewhere visible. Say it once a day as a family and praise the attempt at the hard thing, not the outcome. Remove silence, install language, and culture follows. Let me leave you with this. Children don't need to be told they're confident. They need to experience themselves as capable. When you remove these 5 friction points, overprotection, burnout, pressure, empty praise, and parental avoidance, and a lack of culture, courage starts to show up naturally. And when courage shows up, it gives space for confidence to follow. So if you're just joining here, watch the full workshop. It's pinned to the first comment of this video, and then go back to part 1 so this flows properly for you and you get the most out of it. If this has helped you so far, comment courage below or write down something that you've learned today or benefited from listening about today, and subscribe, hit the bell, turn on the notifications so you don't miss any more content like this. Every single week I create content like this to help parents. Next, in part 3, we are going to build a simple, repeatable confidence framework that you can use over days, weeks, and months. I will see you there. If you've watched the last 2 parts of this workshop, you now understand something most parents never get taught. Confidence doesn't come from words, it doesn't come from praise, and it doesn't come from motivation. Confidence is built, and like anything that's built properly, it follows structure. Today, I want to give you that structure, and I call it the confidence ladder. Now, this is a system we've used for years with tens of thousands of children across the world with the Warrior Academy. And it's the clearest way I know to explain how confidence actually develops. Not overnight, but reliably for life. And here's the first thing you need to understand. Confidence is not a personality trait. Your child is not confident or unconfident. Confidence is a state, and states are built through progression. Children don't jump from anxious to confident in one big leap. They climb step by step, and that's why this ladder matters. Most people unknowingly try to push their child straight to the top towards confidence. They want confidence now. They want their child to speak up, try harder, cope better, and believe in themselves without building the layers underneath. Now, that's a little bit like asking a child to climb onto a roof without a ladder. It's not that the child can't do it, it's that the structure isn't there in the first place. The confidence ladder gives you that structure, and it shows you where confidence really starts, what comes next, and why skipping steps creates anxiety instead of confidence. Now, once you understand the ladder, everything becomes clearer. You stop guessing, you stop overreacting, you stop blaming yourself or your child, and you just build the next rung yourself. So, let me explain how this is all going to work and how it's going to benefit your child and you. At the bottom of the ladder is where every child starts, no matter how confident they appear on the surface. At the top of the ladder is what we call robust confidence. It's not loud or performative confidence, but calm, grounded confidence that shows up under pressure. It's the kind of confidence that lasts for life. And that's what we're aiming for. So between the bottom and the top are 5 distinct rungs of the ladder. Each rung of the ladder builds on the one below. And if a rung is missing, confidence above it just collapses. So you can't miss a single rung on the ladder. That's key. So here's the most important promise of this system. If you consistently build each rung on the confidence ladder in order, you will see changes. In days, at the bottom rungs, in weeks, in the middle rungs, and in months on the top. And this is not theoretical. I've watched it happen thousands of times. And before I name the 5 elements of the ladder, let me make something very clear. You do not need to do everything at once. This is not about overwhelming your child or yourself. And honestly, if you go down that route, it might take you longer anyway. This is about direction, not intensity. If you're doing the next right thing consistently, confidence grows. So, take a moment here to zoom out and let's look at the ladder as a whole before we go deep onto each stage. So the confidence ladder is made up of 5 elements, and here they are: safety, courage, competence, identity, and ownership. Each one plays a specific role, and each one answers a different question your child is subconsciously asking. And confidence only really appears when all 5 are present. So, at the bottom of the ladder is safety, and this is where confidence truly begins. And it's actually the part most people will misunderstand. Safety does not mean comfort. It means emotional predictability. Your child needs to know, I'm allowed to try. I won't be shamed for failing. The adults around me are steady. Without this, the nervous system stays on high alert. And a nervous system in survival mode cannot build confidence. And that's why safety is the foundation. It's not about softness, it's about stability. Think of this like the foundation from which everything else is going to grow. We need that foundation solid because they're going to be referring back to it subconsciously. Now, the second rung is courage. You've already learned why courage matters. I spoke about that in part 1. If you've missed that, go to the beginning. Courage is the decision to act while uncomfortable. And this is where children start stepping into fear instead of avoiding it. This is where they gather evidence. Without courage, nothing else on the ladder can be built. That's why we spent so much time on it in the last section. The third rung is competence. Now, this is where things start to shift visibly. Competence comes from repetition, from practice, from doing something enough times that the child starts to think, I know how to do this. Competence turns courage into capability. That's what we're trying to do. We want your child to feel deeply capable because that feeling is calming to the nervous system. Now, this is where you'll start to see anxiety starting to drop significantly. Now, the fourth rung is identity, and this is where confidence stops being situational and starts becoming personal. Instead of thinking, I did something brave, the child starts thinking, I am someone who does hard things. This is a huge shift. Identity is the goal, and identity is sticky. It changes how a child approaches new situations before they even begin. It's not about them being very good at one sport, it's about them being confident for life. Now, the fifth and the final rung is ownership. This is the top of the ladder. Ownership is when confidence becomes self-directed. The child no longer needs constant reassurance. They don't need to be pushed. I'll give you a funny example that we use in the Warrior Academy. When you first bring your child to a martial arts class here, you're packing their bags, you're encouraging them, you're trying to get them out the door to turn up on time. When they're a white belt. When they're a black belt, they might be 16, 17 years old, or even slightly younger, depending on when they started. They have built intrinsic motivation and drive. They don't need as much external motivation to get to class. And the joke I have with parents is they are packing your bag, getting you in the car, and that is the moment where you notice they have shifted. They now don't need to be pushed. They've got ownership. They're at the top of that ladder. So you'll notice your child starts to take responsibility for their effort, their behavior, their growth, and this is where confidence actually becomes stable, even when parents aren't present. And ultimately, that's our job, isn't it? To prepare our kids for adulthood, for a tough life without us, so that they don't need us. Now, here's something critical that we need to understand. Children can move up the ladder, but also down the ladder. It is not a straight line. A new school, a new environment, a big life change, any of these can knock a child down a rung or two. Now, that doesn't mean you failed as a parent. It means you rebuild from where they are. Now, the ladder gives you a diagnostic tool. Instead of asking, what's wrong with my child, you ask, which rung needs strengthening? Because you understand the ladder, you know exactly where to start back from. And that question changes everything. Let me give you a quick example. If a child refuses to try something new, most parents will think it's a confidence issue, but often it's actually a safety issue or a courage issue. If a child tries but gives up quickly, that's usually a competence gap. If a child succeeds but still doubts themselves, that's an identity gap. If a child performs well but lacks initiative, that's an ownership gap. It's the same behavior, but a different cause, a different solution. And this is why generic confidence advice fails. And hopefully, that should be quite enlightening for a parent to realize the generic stuff doesn't need to be the only thing you focus on. It can be useful, but honestly, it doesn't help your child directly with the problem they need solving. The confidence ladder does that, and that's why it's so brilliant and such a brilliant tool. And all of our instructors, now we've got a team of over 100 around the world, use this system around the world to develop kids' confidence. They can spot the challenges and they can use the solution that we have pre-programmed into the confidence ladder. The ladder shows you it's actually a system. And over the next 5 parts of this workshop, we're going to go deep into each rung of the confidence ladder. One at a time, very practical, very implementable, and you're going to learn exactly what each rung looks like in real life, how parents accidentally block it, and what to do instead. By the end, you'll have a clear plan you can follow over days, weeks, and months. You'll know exactly where your child is and where you need to start progressing to see results very, very quickly. So if you're just joining here, make sure you watch the full workshop. The link is pinned to this video in the first comment, and go back to the previous parts, watch the beginning of the workshop so that all this flows properly for you. And if this framework already makes sense to you, comment ladder below and maybe even write down in one word which rung of the ladder your child is on. Now, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part if you're watching this in stages, or if you don't want to miss any more content just like this to help support your child. In part 4, we'll start at the bottom of the ladder with safety, what it really means and why it's often misunderstood, and how to create it without making your child soft. See you there. If you've followed the workshop so far, you now understand the structure. Confidence isn't random, confidence is built, and like any structure, it needs a solid foundation. Now, that foundation is safety. And before we go any further, I need to clear something up, because this is where a lot of parents get confused. Safety does not mean comfort. Safety does not mean protection from difficulty. Safety does not mean removing all challenge. Safety means emotional predictability. Think about that word, predictability. And without it, confidence can't grow. So, let me explain what I mean by that. A child who feels emotionally safe knows a few very specific things. First of all, they know I'm allowed to try. They know I won't be shamed or feel ashamed for failing. And they also know that adults around me are steady. They know that they're not walking on eggshells. Now, this internal sense of safety allows the nervous system to relax a little bit, just enough for learning, for courage, and for growth to happen. Without it, the child stays in survival mode. And a nervous system in survival mode basically can't build confidence. It just builds anxiety. And right now, we have the most anxious generation of kids I think we've ever seen. And we need to fix it. So, why is this important? Well, and why do we know this? Because it's something I'm seeing in our academies around the world every single day. Children don't arrive lacking confidence because they're incapable. They arrive lacking confidence because their nervous system doesn't feel safe enough to stretch. Let me give you a really simple example. We regularly have children join our academy who won't step onto the mat without clinging to a parent. They won't speak up, they won't engage, and they won't try. Now, that's quite typical for a young child who's 2 or 3 years old. But as they start to get 4, 5, 6, or 7 years old, this sort of behavior shouldn't be occurring as frequently. But we're seeing it actually increase in our academies, not decrease. There is a change, and it's not a good change. Now, at first glance, people assume that these children need confidence. But if you've been studying this for years, you start to realize that's not actually the problem. The problem is safety. Their nervous system is overwhelmed. And until that settles, confidence is impossible. So here's the first principle that you need to understand. Safety always comes before courage. You can't ask a child to be brave if their nervous system feels threatened. That threat doesn't have to be physical. That threat can be unpredictable reactions from parents. It can be fear of embarrassment or fear of being shouted at, maybe fear of disappointing someone or fear of being compared to someone else at school or a sibling. Now, all of these essentially trigger the same internal response. And when that response is active, confidence shuts down. Let me make this really practical. A child who doesn't try is not lazy. A child who avoids is not weak. A child who shuts down is not stubborn. They are protecting themselves, and the protection only lifts when safety is restored. One of the biggest mistakes parents make is confusing pressure with support. They think, if I push, they will grow. If I correct, they'll improve. If I raise the bar, they'll rise. Sometimes that's true, but only after safety is actually established. Pressure without safety just creates fear. Pressure with safety creates growth. The difference matters. Now, let me tell you a story from our academy. Right now, I'm in one of our dojos in Dubai. And this exact dojo is where this story took place. The door is just over there, where we had a young 7-year-old boy join. He walked through that door and he refused to participate. He would stand at the edge of the mat, basically just behind me, behind the Warrior Academy logo. His arms would be crossed like this. His eyes would be down. And over time, his parents were frustrated. They were frustrated on the first class. They were frustrated on the second class. And they told us he just needs confidence and asked us to push him. We didn't. And that caused a little bit of friction and confusion with the parents. Instead, we focused on safety. We made sure that he knew exactly what was happening each class. Expectations became predictable. Remember what I said about emotional predictability. Corrections were calm and specific. Effort was noticed and praised, not outcome. For 2 weeks, he barely moved. He was at the back of the class there. Then one day, he steps forward. No hype, no pressure, just safety. 3 months later, he was at the front of the class where this camera is now. And he was teaching warm-ups as part of our leadership development program. Now, confidence didn't appear because we pushed him. It appeared because his nervous system finally felt safe enough to engage. And his parents did a fantastic job of letting him experience uncomfortability, trusting us with the mentoring, and encouraging him, and being consistent with coming to class and enrolling him in the right area with the right mentors who understood exactly how to build confidence and have the systems, the ladder, in place to achieve it. That is how transformations actually work. This teamwork between parent and mentor. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because it applies at home with your children too. Children need to know that home is this place where mistakes don't equal shame, where emotions don't equal punishment, and where effort is respected, where adults are regulated. And that doesn't mean they're permissive. It means predictable. We want everything to feel fairly predictable in that early safety stage. So let's talk about how parents accidentally undermine safety. One common way is emotional inconsistency. If your child doesn't know which version of you they're going to get, calm, stressed, reactive, withdrawn, they may stay on edge. And the edge kills confidence. We want to get them away from the edge. We want predictability and emotional stability. Kids become cautious, hesitant, hyper-aware. It's their nervous system reacting to their environment. So one of the most powerful things you can do is regulate yourself first. Not perfectly, but consistently. Another way safety gets undermined is through public correction. So correcting a child in front of others, even siblings or friends or relatives, might seem harmless. But for many children, it feels like exposure. And exposure triggers threats. And when threat shows up, confidence drops. Now, a simple rule is this: always correct privately, always praise publicly. That one change alone dramatically increases emotional safety. And your child may not want to be praised publicly, so you have to base this on their personalities as well. So just be aware, see how they feel and how they respond to that praise if it is public, and then tweak it based on their personality. So let's talk about age-specific strategies, because safety looks a little bit different at different stages. For younger children, safety comes from routine and tone. They need predictable transitions, clear expectations, calm and simple instructions, and this reassurance through presence. It's not words, it's if your tone stays steady, it's essentially their nervous system settling. Now, for this age group, safety is mostly about how you speak, not what you say. For primary school age kids, age 5+, safety comes from fairness and clarity. They need to know rules are consistent, consequences are predictable, and they need to know that mistakes don't define them and effort matters. This is where many parents accidentally introduce fear by comparing siblings or other peers. Comparison destroys safety. Every child needs to feel measured against themselves and not others. Now, for teenagers, safety is actually about respect and autonomy. They need to know that they can speak without being shut down, that emotions won't be used against them later, and that disagreement doesn't equal rejection. This doesn't mean agreement, it means containment. A teenager who feels emotionally safe at home is far more likely to take healthy risks outside of the home. Now, let me bring this even closer to home. With my own kids, safety has been the foundation of everything we've built, but that doesn't mean there are no rules. It means predictable rules. It means they know where they stand, and it means they know that trying and failing is acceptable. They know that emotions are allowed, but behavior is guided. And because of that, they are willing to stretch. Now, that's not accidental. It's intentional. It's built that way deliberately. So, here's a simple daily practice that you can start today. And at the end of the day, ask your child one question. Was there anything today that felt hard for you? Then listen, don't fix it, and see how they grow and develop with the focus on safety. In the next part, we are going to move up to the second rung of the ladder, courage. So stay tuned, and as always, if you've enjoyed this part of the video so far, make sure you click subscribe, hit the bell, and receive notifications, or comment with your own experiences. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you check out the other content. Every single week, I post lots of content just like this to help parents like you. I'll see you in the next part. If you've watched part 4, you now understand something essential. Confidence does not begin with courage. It begins with safety. But once safety is in place, something becomes possible. And that is courage. Courage is the second rung of the confidence ladder, and it's where confidence actually starts to take shape. Now, this is the point where children begin to test themselves against the world, which is what we want. And how you handle this rung will determine whether your child grows braver or more avoidant. So, let me be very clear about what courage actually is and what courage isn't. Courage is not fearlessness. Courage is not confidence. Courage is not bold personality. Courage is action in the presence of fear. Let me say that one more time. Courage is action in the presence of fear. For that to happen, we basically need two things. We need fear and we need action. A child who feels nervous and still tries is practicing courage. A child who avoids because something feels uncomfortable is not. And here's the critical part for you as a parent. Confidence is built after courage, not before it. And this is where most parents get a bit stuck. Parents often say to me, my child needs more confidence before they try. But that's actually backwards. If a child waits to feel confident before acting, they may never act at all. Confidence is what arrives after a child survives discomfort and realizes, oh, I can handle this. Courage is the bridge. So at our academies, we see this play out every single day. Children arrive through that door who won't speak, who don't volunteer, who won't even step forward without holding their parents' hands. And it's not because they can't, but because they haven't practiced courage yet. So we don't hype them up, we don't pressure them, and we don't rescue them. We give them manageable challenge, small enough to feel possible, but big enough to feel uncomfortable. That is the sweet spot, which brings us to one of the most, I would say, important ideas in this entire courage and confidence workshop. Courage lives just outside the comfort zone, but not miles beyond it. Let me explain. Too little challenge and courage never forms. Too much challenge and safety collapses. Your job as a parent is not to remove challenge, it's to dose it correctly. And this is one of the most challenging things about parenting. I often see parenting, and I've got 3 kids, as this challenging balance between protection and empowerment. But I want to try and help you achieve that balance because it's crucial. So let's talk about First of all, how parents accidentally block courage. The first way is rescuing too early. We talked about this briefly in part 2, but it matters even more here. The moment a child hesitates, struggles, or looks uncomfortable, many parents jump in. They help, they explain, they smooth the path, and the child loses the chance to complete the courage cycle. Now, the courage cycle goes like this: fear, action, survival, evidence. Fear, action, survival, evidence. Now, if along this cycle you interrupt it and save them, confidence never gets built. And this is why we've got the 3-second rule. And this is why the 3-second rule matters so much. When your child hesitates, pause. Wait 3 seconds, 3 seconds longer than you normally would, even if it feels intolerable for you. Let them try, let them wobble, let them work it out. Those seconds are where courage is trained. Not in speeches, in silence. Now let me give you a real example. I think it was a 9-year-old girl in one of our academies who refused to speak during the drills, even when we asked questions. Now, she knew the answers because we've seen her perform. She knew the answers and she could perform the techniques, but she wouldn't use her voice. Now, her parents wanted us to push her so that she would speak more, and we didn't. Instead, we gave her one tiny courage task. She didn't have to speak to the whole group. She just had to answer quietly to one coach. Now, that was uncomfortable, but it was survivable. And she did it. The next week, she spoke a little bit louder. 2 months later, she was leading a group on a confidence drill that we had created specifically for her. Now, confidence didn't appear because we demanded it. It appeared because courage was trained progressively. Now, this leads to a very crucial rule. Never jump rungs on the confidence ladder. If a child can't manage a small act of courage, asking for a big one is just going to backfire. Instead of building confidence, you teach avoidance. The ladder only works if it's climbed step by step. So let's talk about age-specific courage, because this really does matter. Every age group has different challenges. For young children, courage is physical and social. It looks like trying something new, separating from a parent, speaking to an adult, or joining a new social group or a club. Your role here is calm encouragement and patience. Don't negotiate, don't bribe, don't rush. Just hold the boundary gently and let them step through it. For primary age kids, 5+, courage is more emotional, and it looks a bit like answering questions, coping with mistakes, handling feedback, staying in something even when it feels a little bit hard. And this is where many parents accidentally undermine courage by stepping in emotionally. They soften too much. They reassure too much. Instead, acknowledge the fear and point them forward. Say something like, "I know this feels hard, try anyway." That sentence trains courage better than any praise can actually do. For teenagers, courage is a little bit different. It's all about identity and social risk. So it's things like speaking up, trying something they might fail at, being seen, and really it's about social pressure. So this is where pressure and lectures do the most damage from parents. Teenagers need respectful challenge, not control. Invite them into courage. Don't force it. Now, I want to introduce at this stage one of the most powerful mindset shifts you can give your child. Discomfort is not a warning sign. It's a training signal. Most kids learn to interpret discomfort as danger. Your job as their parent is to help them reinterpret discomfort as growth. This is where language starts to really matter at this stage. And that's why we use a simple family mantra, which I mentioned before in part 1. We do hard things. Not occasionally, not when we feel like it. We do hard things because that's how we grow. Say it out loud with your children before a challenge. Say it during resistance, and say it when quitting feels tempting. Over time, this is going to rewire how your child experiences fear. Fear becomes a cue, not a stop sign. And here's a key distinction that parents need to understand. There is a difference between encouraging courage and forcing compliance. Forcing compliance creates obedience. Encouraging courage builds confidence. If a child feels controlled, courage disappears. If a child feels supported, courage emerges. And this is why tone matters more than tactics. So let me bring this all back home with an example with my own kids. With my own kids, courage is expected, but it's not demanded. So an example there is they're allowed to feel nervous. They're not allowed to avoid everything. And that balance matters. We name the fear, but we don't obey the fear. And because of that, courage becomes normal. So here's a simple daily practice that you can start today with your child. Every day, ask your child, what's one hard thing you did today? Not what they achieved, not what they won, what was hard. Then acknowledge it. That took courage. It's not about hype or exaggeration. It's just about recognition and recognizing the right thing. And what this does is it builds awareness of courage, which then strengthens it. Your child starts to understand that is courage. I did that thing. I got praised for it. I want to do more of the courage thing, which then translates into confidence down the road. Let me say something really important now. Courage doesn't grow in chaos. If a child feels unsafe, rushed, or shamed, or overwhelmed, courage actually starts to shut down. And that's why part 4 mattered so much, which was safety. Safety first, then courage. And it's in that order. It's always in that order. And if your child is currently avoiding something in school or sport or social situations, don't push harder. Go down the ladder, recheck safety, then reintroduce courage in smaller steps. That's how confidence is actually rebuilt. Because remember, they can go up and down this ladder based on the transitions and the big events happening in their life. Here's the truth most parents miss. Confidence isn't built by success. It's built by surviving difficulty. Every time your child does something uncomfortable and lives through it, confidence starts to grow a little bit stronger. It's not loud or dramatic, but it is reliable. And if you're just joining here, you're just joining on this workshop, go back to the beginning and watch the beginning episode, part 1 of this workshop. Or click on the comment below, the pinned comment, to see the entire workshop. Make sure you click subscribe below, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss the next part. In part 6, the next part of this workshop, we're going to move up the ladder to the next rung on the ladder, which is competence. How repetition, skill, and mastery turn courage into calm confidence. That is where anxiety will really start to drop in your child. So, I will see you there. If you've watched parts 4 and 5, you now understand the sequence that we've got with the confidence ladder and how courage and confidence work together. Confidence doesn't start with belief, it starts with safety, rung 1 of the ladder. Then it grows through courage. But courage on its own isn't enough. If a child is brave but feels incapable personally, then confidence still collapses. That is where today's rung comes in. And this rung on the ladder is competence. Competence is the rung of the confidence ladder where courage turns into calm. It's where anxiety begins to drop. It's where effort starts to feel worthwhile. And it's also where children stop asking, can I do this? And start thinking, I know how to do this. So let me be very clear about what competence actually is and what it isn't. Competence is not talent, it's not natural ability, and it's definitely not perfection. Competence is actually earned familiarity. So what is earned familiarity? Well, it's what happens when a child repeats something enough times that their nervous system relaxes. And relaxed nervous systems are confident nervous systems. And this is something that we see constantly in our academies. A child arrives nervous, they are hesitant, they're unsure, and then they try something once and they struggle. And if that struggle is framed correctly, they then want to try again and again and again. And slowly, something changes. Their breathing settles, their movements smooth out, and their face softens a little bit. That is competence forming. And when competence forms, confidence follows, often quite quietly and not dramatically. So here's the mistake many parents make at this stage. They think courage should immediately lead to confidence, but courage without competence feels kind of exhausting. If a child is constantly being asked to be brave without being given enough repetition to feel capable, they eventually burn out. And that's when avoidance creeps back in. So competence is the stabilizer. It's what turns bravery into belief. So let me give you a simple definition that you can remember. Courage is trying. Competence is knowing, and both matter. And they must be built in the right order. One of the most damaging myths in parenting is this idea that children should just know how to do things, how to cope with pressure, how to speak up, how to manage emotions, how to handle failure. The reality is they don't. All those things are skills, and skills are trained through repetition and not through motivation. And this is where many parents unintentionally undermine confidence. They keep changing activities and they quit too early. They chase novelty before their kids even chase the novelty. And the child never stays with something long enough to feel competent. And without competence, confidence never settles. At our academies, we see this all the time. Children who attend sporadically stay anxious, but children who train consistently calm down. And it's not because they're tougher, but actually because they're familiar and their body knows what to expect. Competence is familiarity under pressure. It's familiarity with pressure. So let me tell you a little story to make this all come alive. We had a boy join our academy who was extremely anxious, and there was huge separation anxiety involved here, and the boy was crying before class. He wanted to quit from day one. His parents were worried, but with lots of chats with us and sharing our methodology and how we could support, they believed in us, and that was the first step. His parents finding a company with the right mentors they could actually believe in. Now the temptation was to reassure him or remove the challenge entirely. Instead, we slowed everything down. We kept the same coach. We kept the same routine at the same time with the same other children there in a very small group with lots of personal attention. And the expectations for him were the same. Now at first, nothing changed. Then one day he walked in without crying, and this was the really interesting thing. It wasn't because he felt brave, it was because he felt competent. He knew what was coming. 3 months later, he was one of the calmest kids on the mat. There was no stress in his body language, in his expressions, in his tone of voice. Now that wasn't some sort of confidence hype that we gave him. That was competence, just doing its job. Familiarity with pressure was built. Familiarity with uncomfortability was built. Competence emerged. Now here's the key insight. Anxiety thrives in uncertainty. Competence thrives in familiarity. Competence creates familiarity. So how do parents actually build competence? The answer is simpler than most people would expect. Consistency, the same activity, the same expectation, the same structure, and repetition without chaos. It's as simple as that. So let's talk about how this looks at different ages. For young children, under the age of 5, competence is about predictable routines. They need the same bedtime rhythm, they need the same morning flow, the same cues before challenges, and every time you reduce uncertainty, you increase competence. Now that alone boosts confidence dramatically. For primary school age children, competence comes from skill repetition. Think about it like reading, writing, sport, social interaction. This is where parents often rush in too fast. They move on before mastery has actually had a chance to form. So slow down, let your child repeat. Repetition is not boring to a child. It's actually quite regulating. Now for teenagers, it's a little bit different. Competence becomes deeply tied to their identity. They need to feel capable in something. It doesn't have to be in school. It doesn't have to be in sport, but it has to be real. It can't be faked. Competence without authenticity just doesn't stick because it's so closely linked to their identity. So let's talk about one of the biggest blockers to competence for kids. It's overcorrection from parents. Now, if every attempt is met with feedback, with improvement, we never actually stabilize. The child always feels watched or judged or evaluated, and that quietly kills confidence. So here's a very, very simple rule. Let them finish before you correct. It's as simple as that. Completion builds competence. Correction refines it. If you interrupt too early, competence never forms. Now, another blocker is inconsistent standards. If expectations change daily, children stay on edge. Consistency is what builds trust, and trust is what builds competence. So now what I'd like to do is give you a really practical daily tool that you can use right now, today with your child. Ask your child, what felt easier today than last time? That question trains them to notice competence forming. It's not about the outcome. It's not about success or progress. It's progress awareness. And that accelerates confidence. So what I'd like to do now is bring this all back to the ladder. Let's reference back to the ladder. Without competence, courage feels scary. With competence, courage feels manageable. And that's the shift you're aiming for. This is also where parents need patience. Competence doesn't form overnight, but once it forms, it is durable. You can take a child out of an activity for weeks, and competence remains. Why is that? Well, that's the power of this rung on the ladder. Let me be really clear about something quite important here. Competence is not about winning, it's about control. And a child who feels control of their body, their skills, or their environment feels confident, even if they lose. That's the key distinction. And that's why confidence is built through competence. And competence is calm, not loud. With my own kids, this rung, I would say, has been critical. I encourage my kids not to jump activities constantly. We let skills settle and we prioritize repetition over excitement. And because of that, when challenges come, they don't panic. They don't suddenly look for novelty or run away and want to do something else. They trust themselves. Now, here's a really simple action that you can ask, or a task that you can start today. Pick one area of your child's life where you have noticed anxiety showing up. That could be school, sport, social situations, whatever it is. Now ask yourself one question. Is this a courage issue or a competence gap? If it's a competence gap, stop pushing bravery and instead increase repetition. Lower the complexity, potentially lower the pressure, but stabilize the environment. And what you'll notice is that confidence will follow naturally. If your child is brave, but still anxious, then this rung is normally missing in the ladder. And that's the good news, because competence is trainable. Now, if you are just joining here, I want you to watch the full workshop. If you've just come in for this part of the workshop and you're watching the parts individually, scale right back to the beginning. You can see the link at the bottom of this video, which takes you to the full workshop, where you'll then be guided through the entire process of transforming your child's confidence for life and every stage of the confidence ladder. Make sure that if you have been enjoying this video so far, you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next part and you don't miss future videos. And if this has helped you so far, and perhaps you resonate with this particular rung of the ladder, type competence below. Subscribe, hit the bell, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part, because in part 7, we move up the ladder to identity. This is a really key aspect. This is how children stop saying, I did something brave, and they start believing, I am someone who does hard things. And that's where confidence becomes a part of who they are. See you there. If you stayed with this workshop up to this point, you've already done something most parents never do. You've stopped chasing confidence as a feeling and you've started building it as a structure. So let's quickly orient ourselves on the ladder so we know exactly where we are and where we're going. At the bottom, the first rung of the ladder, we built safety, emotional predictability, steadiness, trust. Then we added courage. Second rung of the ladder, courage. Acting despite feeling fearful or uncertain. Then we stabilized everything, the third rung of the ladder, with competence, repetition, familiarity, skill. Now we reach the fourth rung of the ladder, where confidence becomes internal. This is identity, and this rung is where confidence stops being something a child occasionally accesses and starts becoming something they carry with them. Let me say this really clearly because it's one of the most important ideas in the entire framework. Here it is. Children don't behave according to their potential. They behave according to their identity. And actually, it's the same for adults too. What they believe about who they are quietly dictates what they try, what they avoid, and how they respond under pressure. That's why two children with the same skills can have completely or behave completely differently. One thinks, I'm not that kind of kid, and the other thinks, this is what people like me do. Same ability but different identity, and this is the point in the ladder where confidence becomes more predictable. Before this rung, confidence is situational. Your child might feel confident in one environment and fall apart in another. But after identity forms, confidence starts becoming mobile, portable. It travels with them. Here's the shift that defines this rung. Instead of your child thinking, I did something brave, they start thinking, I'm someone who does hard things. That sentence changes everything. Is your child there yet? Is this something you need to work on? Have a think about that question. And in the comments, write identity if this is really speaking out to you and something you really want to focus on, maybe something that's resonating. So before we get into this, let's slow this down a little bit. Identity is not something you can lecture into your child. It's something that emerges from repeated evidence. And this is where many parents unknowingly interfere. They either label too early or they label inaccurately. And both cause problems. So let me explain. When parents say things like, you're so confident, or you're shy, or you're not a sporty kid, or maybe they say, you're the smart one, they think they're helping, but labels freeze identity too early. And frozen identities actually become ceilings, right? And it's something I've noticed at our academies. At our academies, we are extremely careful with language for this exact reason. We don't say, you are confident. We say things like, that was a confident choice. That showed courage. That's what discipline looks like. If you wanted a phrase for your child to say each day to build their confidence, don't have the phrase of, I am confident. Instead, you have the phrase or the mantra of, I am brave. And that is how identity shifts. Bravery encourages your child making brave decisions. Saying their confidence feels loose. It feels airy. It's got no substance. So, identity should be earned. And it shouldn't be assigned. So when identity is earned, it essentially sticks. Let me give you a really good example here. We had a boy in our academy who had always been described as anxious. His teacher said it, and his parents said it, and he even said it about himself. I'm just an anxious kid, or I'm quite anxious, or I'm scared, or I'm nervous. That wasn't a description anymore. It had become an identity. It was his identity. So every challenge that he faced confirmed it, because he had decided who he was before he entered the challenge. Now, we didn't try to convince him otherwise. You can't go in and completely convince someone that their identity is false. Instead, we changed the evidence. Small acts of courage that we built into his confidence plan. And we essentially just repeated competence bit by bit, consistent expectations. And something really interesting started to happen. One day, after completing a drill that we had in class, and it was a pad drill. It's a pad drill that he actually used to avoid. And he said something really interesting. He said, "I don't think that I'm anxious anymore." That sentence actually made his parents burst into tears because it didn't come from us. It came from him, not from his instructor or his parents or his teacher. It came from in. And because we'd given the parents the mentoring and the understanding, the theory behind why he was feeling this, they knew how powerful that statement was. That was his identity forming. Now, here's the rule that you need to understand. Children believe what their behavior repeatedly proves. Not what you tell them, not what you hope for them, what their actions actually confirm. And this is why identity sits above competence on the confidence ladder. Without competence, identity is fragile. It doesn't really exist. A child can't believe I am capable if experience contradicts it. But once competence is in place, identity can solidify. Now let's talk about one of the biggest mistakes parents make at this run. They try to talk identity into existence, and they say things like, "You're confident, you're brave, you can do anything." But when those words don't match the child's lived experiences, the child quietly dismisses them. They basically come in too early with those mantras. And what can be worse is they learn to distrust praise. We think we should be praising our child a lot, but actually, we should be very careful and very selective with what and how and when we actually praise. Identity has to be discovered by your child. It can't be declared, "You are now this." So how do we build a healthy confidence identity? We do that through reflection, not motivation. Now, your job here is to help your child notice patterns in their own behavior, and that's it. Noticing patterns. That's what builds identity. So here's a simple, really powerful daily exercise that you can do. Once a day, say something like, "I noticed you didn't quit when that got hard. I noticed you tried again even though you were nervous. I noticed you stayed with it." You're not praising the outcome. You're actually highlighting the pattern. And over time, the child, your child, starts to connect the dots. "Oh, this is what I do." That's identity. So let's talk about age, because the differences here are important. For each child of different ages, the rung that we're talking about here can show up in a different way, depending on the stage. So, for younger children, this is under 5 or 6. Identity is very concrete. They think in simple categories: good, bad, can, can't. Your job is to keep identity fluid, avoid fixed labels, and focus on actions and effort. At this age, identity is shaped mostly by tone and repetition, and not by logic. But for primary school age children, identity becomes more comparative. And this is where phrases like, "I'm not good at school," "I'm bad at sport," or I'm not confident like them," comparing, start appearing. And this is the danger zone. You've got to be hyper aware of this specific zone. Comparison hardens identity. So your job is to constantly re-anchor identity to process and not to position. So not "I'm the best," but "I show up." The process. I try. I improve. That's what keeps identity expandable. For teenagers, it shifts again. Identity for a teenager is everything. This is where confidence either locks in or it fractures. Teenagers are hypersensitive to authenticity. They will reject any identity that feels imposed. So don't tell them who they are. Instead, invite them to articulate themselves. Ask questions like, "What kind of person do you want to be when things get hard?" You might be surprised by the answer. "What do you respect in other people? What do you think that says about you?" These questions allow that identity to emerge internally rather than you forcing the identity on them. Imposing an identity on a teenager rarely works. And basically that process is far more durable. Now let me bring all of this back to real life with my own kids again. With my own kids, identity is never framed as talent or personality. We don't say, you're naturally confident. You're just good at this. Instead, we say, this is what disciplined people do. This is what brave people practice. This is how our family handles hard things. We do hard things. Now that subtle shift moves identity from ego to values, their core values. And values-based identity is resilient. Now, here's another really critical idea. Identity grows through consistency across environments. If your child behaves one way at home and another way everywhere else, identity stays fragmented. And that's why routines, expectations, and language matter so much. Because the more consistent the signals, the faster identity stabilizes. And this is actually where parents must be quite careful not to undermine identity during setbacks. A child could do 10 brave things and 1 failure. And if the failure becomes the headline, identity just resets. So here's a little rule that can help you with that. Failures are events. Identity is a pattern. Never confuse the two. Let me give you one more story from our academy here. We had a teenage girl who trained consistently for years, and she was competent. She was disciplined, but every time she made a mistake, she fell apart emotionally. Why was that, do you think? It was because her identity was tied to performance and not to process. And this is actually something we notice with children in our academy who start doing really well. If they win a competition and they haven't necessarily done years of hard graft to win that competition, maybe they get a big win early on, they can start to tie their identity to performance rather than to the process. And that becomes a very challenging situation. When performance dips for these children, or for this girl in particular, identity collapses. So with this teenage girl, we shifted the language. Mistakes just became proof of growth, and effort became the standard. And over time, her identity shifted from, I have to be good, to, I'm someone who keeps going. That's true resilience. And that was what's really special about that process with her. Now, a really practical tool that you can start using at home immediately today is once per week, ask your child, what did you do this week that the old you wouldn't have done? And that question forces identity comparison, not between them and someone else, but between them and their past self. It highlights growth and it reinforces the narrative, I am changing. And that is confidence at the identity level. Now, let me be really clear about something important. Identity does not mean arrogance. Healthy confidence identity is actually quiet. It doesn't need validation constantly, and it doesn't need applause. It shows up as steadiness, as calm, as willingness and resilience. And that's what we're building. If your child is skilled but still doubts themselves, if they do hard things but they don't believe they're capable, if confidence appears briefly and then disappears, this rung is usually missing. And that's good news, because identity can be built deliberately on the ladder. Let me summarize this rung in one clean sentence. Identity is when your child stops asking, can I do this? And starts thinking, this is what people like me do. That's the shift. That is the gold standard for the identity rung on the confidence ladder. And if you're just joining here, make sure you watch the full workshop. The link to that full workshop is pinned in the first comment of this video. But go back to the beginning parts, watch them all, understand the theory and the practical steps for each rung on the ladder, because each rung is fundamental. If this part of the workshop resonated, comment identity below. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, turn on notifications, and you don't miss what's next, because in the next part, in part 8, we reach the top of the ladder, which is ownership. And this is where confidence becomes self-directed, where responsibility replaces reassurance, and your child no longer needs you to push them. that is where confidence becomes truly independent. And that's what I want for your child. So I'm looking forward to seeing the next part. See you there. If you followed the workshop all the way to this point, you've done something rare. You haven't looked for shortcuts. You haven't chased quick fixes. You've built confidence in your child step by step, the right way, from the ground up. Now, let's take a moment to orient ourselves around the confidence ladder. We started with safety, emotional predictability, and steadiness. Then we built courage, acting despite feeling fear. Then, third rung, competence, repetition, familiarity, and skill. Fourth rung was identity, and this is who I am. I do hard things. The next thing, the stage we're at now, is the final rung of the confidence ladder, and that is ownership. This is where confidence stops relying on you as a parent. And for many parents, this is both the goal and the hardest part. Ownership is the moment confidence becomes self-directed. And it's when your child no longer needs constant reminders, emotional rescuing, reassurance before everything. And instead, they begin to take responsibility for their effort, for their behavior, for their improvement, for their recovery after mistakes, all these little things. And this is what most parents actually mean when they say they want their child to be confident. They want them to own their life. Raising a child is actually training them for adult life. And ultimately, our job as a parent is to prepare our kids to live without us. And what we really want is our kids to grow up to be happy and successful as adults and to live a beautiful life. That isn't possible without having courage and confidence, and having ownership of that is absolutely key. Without ownership, without this final rung of the ladder, they will always need you, even as adults. Let me be very clear about something very important. Ownership is not independence without guidance, and it definitely isn't abandonment. Ownership is responsibility within a safe structure. It only works when the rungs below it are already in place. So if you try to force ownership too early, what you'll notice is that it just backfires. Instead of confidence, you get anxiety or rebellion. And this is where many parents accidentally sabotage everything they've built down the confidence ladder. They either hold on too tightly for too long or let go too suddenly and call it independence. Both create problems for different reasons. Ownership must be earned and not demanded. So, first of all, let's define ownership properly. Ownership means your child starts to say things like, I'll try again, I need to practice more, or that didn't work, I'll fix it, or I forgot, and that's on me. Notice very carefully what's missing. Excuses, blame, avoidance, that's confidence in actions. And our academies, at the Warrior Academy, we notice that ownership is the difference between kids who train because they're told to and kids who train because it matters to them internally, intrinsically. The second group doesn't need pushing. They struggle, they still fail, but they don't collapse. That is ownership. So let me tell you a little story. We had a 13-year-old who had all the skills. They were strong, they were capable, they were technically excellent when it came to martial arts technique. But every time something went wrong, he actually blamed the coach, the rules, other students. And his confidence on the surface level, he appeared confident. His confidence seemed high. But what we realized was that confidence wasn't durable. It wasn't real because he didn't own anything. So we shifted the focus. And we didn't do it through lectures or through big punishments or lots of discipline, anything like that. Just one question every time something went wrong. What's your part in this? And at first, as a 13-year-old boy who felt like everyone else was at fault, he resisted. And then slowly, something started to change. He started to reflect. He started to adjust. He started taking responsibility. And as ownership over those micro mistakes started happening and increased, so did his confidence. He wasn't louder, he was actually calmer. Now, the key insight of this rung is that confidence becomes durable when responsibility replaces reassurance. Now, as long as a child needs reassurance, confidence is fragile. When they own the process, confidence stabilizes. So let's talk about the biggest fear that parents have at this stage. If I stop reminding them, won't everything fall apart? Sometimes briefly, and that's okay because confidence often grows through natural consequences, not through lectures. And this is where parents have to really try to resist the urge to rescue. And it's one of the hardest things, but it's also one of the most powerful shifts you can make. If you stop solving problems for your child and you start solving problems with them and then step back, everything changes. Try to ask, what do you think will happen next? What's your plan? What will you do differently next time? Then let them act, even if what they do next is imperfect. In fact, especially if it's imperfect, because that's the key to giving them ownership. Now, let's talk about age differences, because that does matter a lot. For younger children, under 5, ownership is very small, and it looks like packing their own bag, remembering simple routines, cleaning up without being chased. And it's not about perfection, it's about participation. It's getting them involved. If you do everything for them, ownership never actually develops. For primary school age children, it's a little bit different. Ownership becomes more cognitive. Homework, commitments, effort, these sorts of things. And this is where many parents overmanage. They remind, they nag, they check constantly. I don't need to think, someone else will. And that's how confidence suffers. Instead, make expectations clear and let responsibility sit with them. Support without controlling. Now for teenagers, ownership is existential. And this is where confidence becomes adult level. They need to own choices and consequences, and they need to own direction. And this is terrifying for parents. But here's the truth. A teenager who never owns anything never develops real confidence. They either rely on others all the time, or they rebel against them. Neither of those two options or routes is actual confidence. So let's talk about a mistake that destroys ownership faster than anything else, and it's over rescuing after failure. Think about this. If your child fails and you as a parent rush in emotionally saying, it's okay, it doesn't matter, and they were wrong anyway, then the intention for you might be kindness, but the outcome is accidental disempowerment. Because failure is where ownership is actually forged. So here's a better response in those situations. Acknowledge the emotion, then redirect responsibility. I can see that was frustrating. What's the lesson here? Will you try next time? What we're trying to do here is teach resilience, and resilience is confidence under pressure. And this is also where your language matters immensely. You need to avoid you always, you never, because those terms basically destroy ownership. Instead, try to use what happened, what's your responsibility here, what's the next step? Because those questions invite ownership instead of shame. So, let me bring this into my own home with my own kids for you. In our house, ownership is non-negotiable. They're supported and they're guided, but they're not carried. If something is forgotten, we don't panic as parents. We try to reflect, what could you do next time? And that repetition builds ownership, and ownership builds confidence. So here's a really powerful weekly practice that you can start immediately. Once a week, ask your child, what's one thing you're proud of owning this week? Remember, not winning, not succeeding, owning. And that could be an age-specific question, right? If it's a younger child, it could be slightly different. There could be effort, it could be responsibility, it could be recovery from something. What that does is it reinforces the identity of, I am responsible. And that's the highest form of confidence. Now let me say something that might be a little bit uncomfortable, but we're going on this confidence journey and it's important. A confident child is not a child who always feels good. A confident child is a child who can handle feeling bad without falling apart. Ownership gives them capacity because they know deep inside, I can deal with this. Now, this is why ownership is the top rung of the confidence ladder. You can't skip to it, but once it's there, everything below stabilizes. Safety becomes internal. Courage becomes habitual. Competence becomes reliable. Identity becomes anchored. And that's real confidence. So let me summarize this final rung on the confidence ladder in one sentence. Ownership is when your child stops asking for reassurance and starts taking responsibility for their own growth. And that is the goal. So, if you are just joining here for this part of the workshop, make sure you click on the link below and watch the full workshop from the very beginning, and have a look through the comments from other parents and maybe share your own experience of building your child's confidence in the comments below. If this part in particular resonated, then what I'd love you to do is comment ownership below. And let's have a chat, let's have a discussion in the comments. I always reply to every single comment. Subscribe to this channel as well. Hit the bell and turn on notifications because you don't want to miss what's happening next. In the next part, I'm going to highlight to you the top 10 mistakes that parents make when it comes to building confidence on the confidence ladder. You already know what the confidence ladder is. I now want to stop you from making the top 10 mistakes that I've noticed having mentored parents through this ladder. And after that, in the final part, we're going to move on to a live Q&A where I'm going to answer real parent questions and show you how to apply the confidence ladder to your specific child and situation. I will see you there. If you've been following this workshop up until now, you will understand the confidence ladder in detail. You know, confidence is not something you hype into existence. It's something you build step by step, and you need a process to do. And yet, even loving, committed parents can accidentally undermine confidence every day. And it's not because they don't care. It's because they've been taught the wrong things. So, in this part, I want to walk you through the top 10 mistakes I see parents make and how to fix them. And the reason I want to do this is because I want you to have one resource, one video that becomes your long-term guide for developing your child's confidence. By following this, you know exactly how to build your child's confidence up from scratch. You know how to isolate challenges they've got and where to bring them back up the ladder so they develop more confidence. And now want to make sure that when mistakes happen, we can fix them, or to prevent you making mistakes at all. So this should be your ultimate guide with everything you'll ever need to know about confidence ever. So let's get started. I just want to say that it's not about blame, first of all. All of this is just about awareness, because once you see the patterns that I see having worked with so many parents and so many kids, confidence becomes so much easier to build. So let's get cracking. Mistake number 1. Trying to build confidence with words instead of with experience. Now, this is the most common mistake of all. Parents talk, they encourage, they motivate, they reassure, and then they're confused when confidence doesn't grow. But here's the truth. Words on their own don't build confidence. Experience does. And if your child hasn't done something hard, no amount of praise will actually make them believe that they can. The fix: reduce talking, increase doing. Instead of saying, you can do it, ask, what's the next small step? And then let them take it on their own. Mistake number 2, removing discomfort instead of training through it. Modern parenting often treats discomfort like danger. If a child feels nervous, adults rush in to soothe. And if a child struggled, adults step in. If a child fails, adults soften reality, but discomfort is not the enemy. Avoidance is the enemy. And the fix here is to name the discomfort calmly. I know this feels uncomfortable. Try anyway. Then stay present without rescuing, because that's how courage is actually trained in your child. Mistake 3, skipping rungs on the confidence ladder. Parents want results, I get that, and they want results fast, especially if they see their child lacking confidence and in pain. So they jump straight to be confident, speak up, try harder. But if safety, courage, and competence, the first 3 rungs of the ladder, are missing, then your child can't comply. They don't need more pressure. They need the previous rung on the ladder. And it's as simple as that. So the fix is this. When your child struggles, I want you to observe the ladder and go down the ladder, not up. Now, everything in your mind will say, we need to go up, we need to push more. Don't. Reject that feeling. Go down the ladder. Ask this. Is this a safety issue? Is courage missing? Is competence not there yet? And then rebuild properly. All right, mistake number 4, overprotecting in the name of love. Remember I spoke about at the beginning of this workshop how parenting is this perfect balance or challenging balance between protection and empowerment, right? And sometimes the protection, the reason we overprotect is because we're doing it in the name of love. I love my child, I don't want them to go through that. But you actually rob them of agency and resilience long term by doing that. So this one is subtle, but it's very common. Parents step in too early because they care. It's not because you don't care. And they rescue because they don't want their child to suffer. But overprotection quietly teaches your child, I can't handle this on my own. And what happens is their confidence erodes. What's the fix? The fix is to use the 3-second rule, and this is for you as parents less than it is for your child. Let your child try. Let them wobble, because those moments build self-trust. Wait for 3 seconds before you jump in. Unless it's something very dangerous they're doing, feel the uncomfortability yourself. 3 seconds later, your child will overcome it. They'll build resilience and agency long term. Mistake number 5, creating burnout through pressure and performance. Some children look confident until they actually burn out, and they're pushed to win, they're pushed to perform, they're pushed to achieve, and eventually they just quit. That's not a lack of confidence, it's basically exhaustion. So how do you fix this? Well, you've got to shift the goal from winning to repeatability. Try to ask, do they want to do this again tomorrow? And if not, the pressure is too high. That's the key. You want the difficult, challenging things to be repeatable. That is how you balance protection and empowerment. Does your child actually want to repeat it? If you crack that, they'll build confidence very quickly. Mistake number 6, praising outcomes instead of effort and process. All right, when children are praised only on results, what you'll find is that their confidence, the confidence they do build, becomes quite fragile. They start to fear failure, and they seem confident providing they're always achieving. The second they aren't achieving, that confidence vanishes. You'll find that your child starts to gradually avoid risk. They start to want to protect their image, the identity that they have as someone who always wins rather than someone who does hard things. So confidence turns into performance anxiety. Praise can be a double-edged sword. You have to praise the attempt. That took courage, you stayed with it, you didn't quit, and let outcomes be information rather than identity. Mistake number 7 is labeling children too early. For instance, you're shy, you're confident, you're not sporty, you're the smart one. Labels can feel helpful, and you think that you're trying to encourage them, but they aren't. They actually freeze identity. And the fix here is to describe the behavior, not the personality. For instance, that was a brave choice. That showed effort. Let the identity emerge within your child naturally. Mistake number 8 is inconsistent rules, reactions, and expectations. So, children can't feel confident in chaos. If rules change all the time, they change daily, and if consequences are unpredictable, if emotions determine reactions, then the nervous system, your child's nervous system, stays on edge. And a child's nervous system on edge cannot build confidence. So the fix here is be boringly consistent. The same rules, the same tone, the same follow-through. Predictability creates safety, and safety creates confidence. Mistake number 9, not modeling courage and ownership yourself. This is a tough one for parents, but children don't learn confidence from instructions. They learn it from observation. If they never see you try hard things, feel nervous and act, then they never learn to take responsibility. They never learn to recover from mistakes because they've never seen you recover from from mistakes, and they won't believe it's actually possible. Children believe things are possible when they've seen it. So let your child witness your effort. Say, this is tough for me. I'm actually feeling nervous, or I'm going to do this anyway. And that normalizes courage. That teaches your child, we do hard things, we do them even if we feel scared, and courage is a part of our family culture. Mistake number 10, the last mistake of the top 10 mistakes, taking responsibility that belongs to your child. Now, I've left us to the end because I think it's one of the most damaging mistakes that parents typically make when they work with their children on developing their confidence. Parents remind, parents nag, parents rescue, parents manage. They manage everything. And what then happens is the child never owns anything. And confidence can't grow without ownership. Your child has to feel like they own the mistakes they make, the failures they've got, the challenges they go through. So how do we fix this? We need to transfer responsibility to your child from you, slowly. We do this by asking things like, what's your plan? What will you do? What will you do differently next time? How would you do that differently? Step back. Let natural consequences teach. And let me share this with you because it's pretty important. You don't need to fix all 10 mistakes at once, right? This is a journey as much as it is for your child as it is for you. Pick one, remove it, and confidence will start to grow faster than you expect. If you're watching this and you feel overwhelmed, that's completely normal. The key thing here, I think, about parenting and developing young people is not that you need to be perfect. You don't need to be the perfect parent. It's about becoming a clearer parent. It's about being directionally correct. Confidence doesn't need perfection. I was asked recently, on a podcast, do I think it's possible for parents with low confidence to develop kids with high confidence? And my answer is yes. It's seeing the imperfection that teaches them, my parent, my dad or mum, has courage, and they learn that. And if they learn that you have courage, they will do that themselves and they will build confidence. What your child needs more than anything is consistency. So one of the most important reframes I want you to take away from this entire workshop is that confidence isn't something you give your child. It's something you stop blocking. Remove the friction and the system works. Now, if you're just joining this workshop on the last part here, make sure you watch the entire workshop from start to end. I've broken it into little parts to make it easier for you, or if you've got over 2 hours, you can click on the link below and you can watch the full workshop in one go. The link there is in the first comment pinned. Otherwise, you can go back to the earlier parts, so all of this should flow properly for you. So, if the 10 problems have hit home for you, maybe you relate to, not 10 problems, the 10 mistakes, if that you relate to them and they really stood out, then comment below with fix it. And let's talk about some of those challenges that you've experienced, some of the mistakes, and let's see if we can overcome them together. I reply to every single comment, so if you get stuck, just comment and I'll reply to you. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, turn on notifications so you don't miss the final part where I'm actually going to be moving into a slightly different format. I'm going to be talking to other parents and I'm going to have a live Q&A from parents who recently watched this workshop that I delivered in person, where I had a list of questions from them I would like to share with you, because I'm sure as a parent you will relate to those questions. Real questions, real parents, which should help you on your journeys through the confidence ladder. I want this to be the ultimate guide for you, and one of the best ways to do that is by bringing in some real life examples. So I will see you there. Welcome to the final part of the confidence workshop. In this section, I'm just doing a very casual Q&A. This is more like the group coaching that I do for our parents online. And really within this, I want to share with you 5 or 6 questions that we typically get asked, or I typically get asked, when I do deliver this confidence workshop for parents, or when I go through the confidence ladder. It might be quite similar to some of the challenges that you might experience as you go through it too. So 5 or 6 questions. Remember, if anything stands out to you or you relate to anything, write your own comments or questions in the video itself. Underneath this, type in a question. I reply back to every single question on this channel. So let's get started with the first question. What if my child just refuses to try anything new? Now, if your child refuses to try anything new, it's typically because that first rung on the ladder, safety, hasn't been established. Remember back on the workshop where I talked about children who came to the Warrior Academy and they were too nervous to join in. That typically was a sign that safety wasn't in place. Now, as a parent, you might look at that and say, they're not trying new things, therefore they are not confident. But a parent who understands the confidence ladder will say, they're not trying new things, they don't feel safe. So you need to go back to the first rung of the ladder and analyze the emotional stability side. That all comes down to predictability. What your child needs is familiarity and predictability in expectations. If you tick that, you'll remove the overwhelm. The next thing you can do is you can shrink the challenge. So sometimes they don't want to try new things because the expectation is too high or the challenge seems too big. So shrink the challenge or do it in bite sizes. A tiny step is better than a big step which they don't want to do and they fail out and they never want to repeat. A little step which seems too small for you can actually be the start of that compounding. Think of it a little bit like a snowball that builds up momentum and gets bigger all the time. That's what you're trying to do. The final thing is, what's your disposition here as a parent? Are you calm? Are you consistent? One of the challenges I found is that when parents have a child who doesn't want to try new things, they try to force it. And you can't really force a child through that safety stage. You have to be calm and consistent with them. So if you do those things, check the safety first, shrink the challenge a little bit, and then be calm and consistent. That normally always encourages your child to try new things over time. Question 1, I hope that was useful. Right, the second question I have here. How long does this take before I see changes? So if you remember on the workshop, one of the key things I spoke about was removing friction. It was actually taking away, not increasing things. We were taking away courage blockers. That was one of the first key things, right? Removing courage blockers or removing things that made your child not feel safe. When you do take those things away, you start to notice changes within a few days. So the first changes happen within a few days. It gets more complicated when you get to developing proper courage and competence. And that takes longer. You're looking at 2 to 3 weeks on the courage and the competence stages. The identity and ownership stage can take months. So if you imagine you're looking at the ladder, the first one or two rungs on the ladder can take days, typically the first. Then rungs 2, 3, and maybe 4 can take weeks, and 4 and 5 can take months. So really, if you were going to take a child through a transformation on the confidence ladder, you're looking at a 6-month journey. And then you have to bear in mind, this isn't just a transformation for your child, it's a transformation for you as well. Ultimately, you have to learn on this confidence ladder what each stage represents. And when your child goes through something and they drop in confidence, where do you pick back up? It's all well and good your child going the whole way through the confidence ladder in 3 months. But I guarantee you when a big transition or event happens in their life, like they go through bullying, they change school, their girlfriend or boyfriend breaks up with them when they're a teenager, whatever it is, they will go down a rung. And you need to know when to pick them back up. So don't see this as I need to get to the top of the ladder as quickly as possible. See this as a journey through their soft skill development. What we're learning here is resilience, it's leadership, it's emotional regulation, emotional intelligence, it's courage. These things are all vital for preparing your child for adult life. It's not about rushing through it. It's about doing it properly. So I hope that helps answer that question. All right, next question. Question 3. My child looks confident, but melts down under pressure. Okay, that's not real confidence. That's performance confidence. Your child is tying the outcome of whatever they do to their success or failure. And if they don't achieve something, they melt down. The performance has become the main goal. And so for them, outcome is everything. Now that can typically occur when a child experiences a big win early on in their confidence journey or within a new sport or whatever it is. They've positioned their identity as I'm good at this. And their confidence comes from always being good at this, rather than positioning their identity to, I try hard, I never give up. This is a process. One is performance-based, outcome-based. One is process-based, effort-based. And then what happens is a parent reinforces that identity with praise on the outcome or the performance. You're great at this, you did really well, and you're very talented, rather than the process and the effort. You tried really hard, you never gave up, and so on. Those two things are what creates a child who's got performance confidence, rather than a child who has real confidence. And real confidence comes from being okay with struggling through something, overcoming something, having ownership over the experience of challenging themselves and then repeating it all the time. So that's something to really focus on. The other interesting thing is that pressure exposes gaps in competence or safety as rungs on the competence ladder. So go back and analyze those. You want to really start focusing on routine, on repetition, and less on evaluation. So start to put all that emphasis on the routine, making things predictable, and not so much on getting a specific outcome. You do those things, everything will change for your child. They won't start, they'll stop melting down when they're under pressure. And that's really key. One of the most important things is you don't remove pressure entirely. Pressure gets a bad rep these days. What we need to focus on is tools to manage pressure effectively. Question number 4. What if my child constantly compares themselves to others? Really good one. Now, comparison means that your child it means that their identity is essentially externally anchored, right? They base their identity on the things around them rather than who they are as a person. So one of the things we need to do in this situation is shift the focus to effort and practice and not to personality. Comparison becomes really, really key. What I found is a lot of parents subconsciously compare their kids to their other kids. So siblings, a sibling comparison, or to their friends in school, whatever it is. And we try to encourage our kids to be competitive as parents. And one of the mistakes that we make is we make our kids compete with each other, even if they're different ages. Try and do this instead. When you want to encourage competitiveness with your child, instead of getting them to compete with their siblings and compare subconsciously, get them to compete with you in a fun way. So instead of saying, who's the fastest to get to the top of the climbing frame, or who's the fastest to get their shoes on, whatever it is, and then one sibling always feeling like, oh, I haven't managed to beat my other sibling, and that's the kind of rivalry, because comparison sets in. Instead, make them a team and say, I bet you can't beat me to get our shoes on. I bet you can't race me over there. And you make this part of the experience where the siblings are together, they're a team. And you'll find that they're not then comparing themselves so much to peers on their level, and that changes the whole game entirely. And the final thing there, I suppose, is the way in which you track their personal progress. So when it comes to progress, a lot of parents will subconsciously track the progress of their child to other kids in their class, in their group, or siblings. Instead, you want to try and make that very individual. And this is one of the things I love about martial arts. Martial arts can be very competitive, but it's typically competitive with yourself. There is a very tangible process and hierarchy when it comes to the belt system. They can visibly see the new color of the belt. That's green, that's blue, that's red. It's a journey of self. It's feeling a part of a community while growing independently at their own stage and rate. And that is really key. Within martial arts, kids might race ahead or come back, and life comes in and out. You know, sometimes we slow down or we speed up. But the bottom line is, we're always forging this self-reflective personal journey, and it's very holistic in nature. So there's tangible progress through something they can visibly see, feel, touch, the belt system, but it is internal. It's all about developing themselves. So it's basically self-development. It's a self-development program while being part of a community. So I'd definitely recommend looking into martial arts as a great tool for helping with that. Now, this question is, how do I push without damaging our relationship? So the first thing I would say is, don't push too hard. And this is really difficult. Parenting is that balance between protection and empowerment, right? You want to push just enough that they leave the comfort zone and they feel a bit uncomfortable, but they want to repeat. You push too hard, they're doing something outside of their comfort zone, which they can't achieve at all, and then they regress back in the comfort zone and they don't want to repeat it. If you do that consistently, you're going to damage their confidence, you're going to increase their anxiety, and also potentially damage your relationship with them or how they see pressure and being pushed. They start to associate pressure and being pushed as something they can't achieve. So going back to that snowball analogy, it's more about compounding little wins gradually. So they feel something difficult, they go back to the comfort zone, then they want to do it again, and they understand that it's something normal. They repeatedly challenge themselves. That's the key. Never try to dismiss the emotion, right? So how do I push without damaging our relationship? You don't deny them of the emotion. If they feel scared, say, yeah, this is scary. It's okay to feel scared. You can even talk about experiences you've had where you felt scared and did it anyway. That's really key. You need to share with them that you've experienced that emotion before and that their emotion is justified. Don't deny them of that. You actually do more damage to them in the relationship, and you actually prevent them from wanting to share their emotions longer term with you. If you want to teach them ownership over their emotions and emotional regulation, the first step of that is understanding and processing their own emotions. So that's key. Finally, staying calm, cool, collected, and emotionally regulated yourself is what will help them go back out there and do something more uncomfortable, right? Push the boundaries more. Feel uncomfortable because they are using your emotional regulation, your calm, your steadiness as the foundation of where they leap from. So if you're panicky or you're pushing them too hard, or they can see you're in a heightened state of excitement or anxiety, that might be a bit unsettling for them. So try to focus on that. I hope that helps when it comes to trying limiting the damage that you might cause if you do push your child too much. Final question here. I've left this one to last because it's an important one. What if I feel like I've already messed this up? Maybe you've got a child who's already a teenager, or they're a preteen, or they're 9 years old or above, and you feel like you've made a bunch of mistakes when it comes to developing their confidence. Here's what I'm here to tell you. I've worked with 50,000 families around the world. We work with 10,000 kids every single week in 7 different countries right now. We've got a full-time team of over 100 instructors who manage everything that goes on within the Warrior Academy and the Bates Foundation around the world. Every single day, parents come to us with kids who are hyper anxious and they're teenagers. They've been through a decade of parents not leaning in to the theory, the exercises, or the practices that I've just shared with you. Parents who, if they watch this workshop, might think, I've made so many mistakes. I haven't done half of this stuff right. And yet, almost all of our children who go through this process see a radical improvement in their confidence. Why is that? The answer to that is that confidence can be rebuilt at any time. You haven't damaged your child by not taking them through exercises on the ladder, by making mistakes as a parent. All of this can be improved. Hope is never lost. And I want to really let that sit with you. One thing I've noticed is that kids respond really, really quickly when we don't rush them. And sometimes you've got to slow down a little bit to go faster. So when you look at the confidence ladder, and I've said to you before, start with safety. We're not adding new things, we're removing things. Look at courage. We're not making them do big, scary things straight away. We're actually just removing things. We're doing a simple 3-second rule. Kids respond really quickly to those things because we're not adding new things, we're taking the broken things, the friction points away. Do those first, and you start to see shifts very, very quickly. Progress actually starts to compound when that happens. Referring back once more to the snowball technique, if you feel like you haven't done this anymore, just see it as you're building that snowball at the top of the hill. You're slowly adding layers on to a tiny snowball, and it feels really small at first. But within a couple of weeks or a few months, you're going to be pushing this massive snowball down a hill, and you'll be smiling and thinking back to this moment where you thought, have I messed this up? Because ultimately, you had the calm and the consistency and the patience to push through and follow a system that's been proven to work. So, that is it for the confidence workshop and for the Q&A. I really hope that over the last 2+ hours of this workshop, you've gained a lot of clarity. We've dispelled the myths. You've got a proper system in place to navigate building your child's confidence, giving them courage, reducing their anxiety. If you haven't watched the full workshop and you've just joined me for this Q&A, then I really encourage you to either go back to the playlist and watch each part individually, or go to the comment below, the first comment in this video. It's pinned to the top, where it encourages you to watch the entire full workshop. If you do that, you will have the ultimate guide to developing your child's confidence, something you can refer back to again and again and again as your child goes through all these different transitions in their life. Because one thing's for sure, your child may appear confident one day, but they can have wobbles throughout their life. And the key as a parent is that you have the knowledge, the skills, and the exercises, and the emotional regulation to mentor them through it. The ultimate goal really that we're trying to achieve here is to prepare your child for a happy and successful life as an adult. And as a parent, if you are equipped with a system like the confidence ladder, I guarantee you've got a far better shot of achieving that for your child. Confidence is one of, if not the most important, influencing aspects of giving your child an incredible life. So, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed the whole workshop. Make sure you share your insights, your feedback, your thoughts about this entire workshop below in the comments. I reply to every comment. And before you leave, hit subscribe. Click on the bell for notifications and make sure you don't miss future content. Every 4 to 6 weeks, I release another workshop just like this. So I hope to see you more often on this channel, and thank you for staying tuned.